Welcome back. Today we're talking about a book by one of my favorite authors, a French author called Yasmina Reza. She's a playwright and a novelist, and she's had a long and distinguished career writing some pretty phenomenal works. And today I want to talk about her latest novel, which is called Anne-Marie la Beauté, in English, Anne-Marie the Beauty. Before we talk about the book, a little background on the author. She is one of France's most respected contemporary playwrights. And she came to prominence in the mid-1990s with a play called Art, which was a massive global phenomenon. It played in many cities around the world. I think it was a great success in London especially. And it was the story of three friends who are these bourgeois Parisians, and one of them has bought a canvas of modern art that is just a white canvas. And the play is all around the discussion of whether it's art or whether it's not art, whether the guy got ripped off, what is the definition of art, and so on. It's an absolutely brilliant play that put Yasmina Reza firmly on the map. And then eventually she started writing some other plays. There was notably The God of Carnage, which was about parents of two feuding kids who get together, and that degenerates into a massive feud. And it was adapted into a movie by Roman Polanski, He Who Shall Not Be Named. And aside from that, she's also written some really good novels, and I'm a big fan of Yasmina Reza's novels. They're always very insightful and incisive with regard to a certain French bourgeois, middle bourgeois sort of vibe, and she always does a phenomenal job at looking at these lives. There are two books that I'd read in her bibliography that I'd really enjoyed. One was called Happy Are the Happy, and in French it was originally titled Heureux les Heureux. And the second novel that she wrote that I particularly enjoyed was one called Babylon. And both of those looked at typical bourgeois lives. In Happy Are the Happy, she really did an exercise in interweaving lives, and it jumped from one life to the next, but it was always quite well done and quite interesting. Another work that she did that was really fascinating was that in 2007, during the French presidential election, she was invited by one of the candidates, Nicolas Sarkozy, who eventually became president, to join him on the presidential campaign trail and to write some sort of hagiography of him, or at least that's what he thought she was going to do, right? You know, a glowing review of this political candidate. And in fact, what came out was a bit of a demolition job, and it really stuck to Sarkozy throughout his presidential term, his one presidential term. And there was notably an episode that she described where Sarkozy was on a jet with all his advisors, reading the paper, and they were all deliberating on a very important piece of policy. And Sarkozy said nothing and turned the newspaper around and showed a newspaper ad for Rolex and said, "Elle est belle la Rolex." Isn't this Rolex a beautiful watch? And what stuck to him after that specific piece of writing was that he was a very blingy president. He wasn't close to people's daily preoccupations and so on. So Yasmina Reza really pushed history in a certain direction thanks to this book. And what was impressive is that she stayed independent in writing this book rather than writing the puff piece that she had been invited on the campaign trail to write. So I have a lot of respect for this author. I think she's always been quite high in an author that writes books that are very insightful, very accessible, a lot of fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but it gets you thinking about certain issues, and again, I have a lot of time for her. So it's all the more saddening to say that her latest book, Anne-Marie the Beauty, is really not very good. For starters, it's very short. It's like 180 pages or something, even less, 120. And so it feels very much like a short novella. And the theme is interesting. It's the story of an aging actress who has never really had much of an acting career. She's always been in sort of second zone regional theater, not a very successful stage actress, let alone TV or cinema, who has lived permanently in the shadow of a friend that she made early on in her career in the theater, who became a major movie star. And so she recalls the evolution of her career, of that friendship, of how the friendship really evolved, not in a positive way, because of the friend's growing fame and success. And she doesn't really seem to notice it. She clings on to this friendship, even though the friend, this movie star, treats her like dirt. And so there it is. It's a tale of two lives connecting, and not in a particularly successful way. And then it stops. And so it should have been a little bit more meaty, especially given the really interesting theme of friendship, a degrading friendship due to the circumstances of fame and fortune and success. And unfortunately, it really is a bit light. It could have gone a lot deeper, and it could have been so much more interesting, especially in the hands of such a powerful writer as Yasmina Reza. So unfortunately, I have to give it a bit of a pass on this one. And if anybody's interested in reading anything by this author, then I really suggest to start with some of her plays, like Art or The God of Carnage, or even her novels are very good. And like I said, Happy Are the Happy or Babylon. If you can find translations in English or read it in the original French, they're super fun books. They're quick reads, and they'll get you thinking about certain issues. I've never read the political book about Sarkozy, but I hear it's very good, and I should probably get around to it at some point. But what I can tell you is this is definitely not the entry point into this author's bibliography. It's a pretty forgettable book, and I certainly didn't enjoy it all that much.